Man, I'm gonna get hate for this one. Okay, so let me make one thing clear from the outset. I fucking love Samurai Jack. I honestly do think it's one of the greatest animated series of all time, and I'm incredibly happy that after 13 years of waiting, it finally gets the conclusive ending it really deserves. But that doesn't mean my critical thinking skills are gonna go out the window. It's not a perfect conclusion. It could plod along at a snail's pace at a few points, and it really seemed like there was no way to continue from the original directly in a satisfying way, so it was no surprise they needed to make this season stand alone almost entirely, thus why they need to cut ahead 50 years to allow that to make sense. They worked very well with the problems that came with continuing something that far back, but it does stand to reason that someone unaware of these problems will notice a bit of mood whiplash if they watch the whole thing. But then there's the one truly fatal flaw I want to talk about, and that's the ending. I'm not here to take away from the emotional impact of it or anything, and I'm not here to tell you how you should feel, but I am here to be honest about what I saw. Oh, and by the way, if you were expecting to not get spoilers, then you clearly haven't paid attention to anything that's been going on, including the title of the video. This is your last chance to back out. Alright, so at the very end of the series, Jack is about to marry Ashi back in the past when Ashi collapses. This isn't the problem though. I mean, earlier we saw her experience pain as Aku left her, in her own words. So it stands to reason that part of her could have died at that moment, and it was really only a matter of time before the rest of her body failed. Real dick move that they waited to her wedding to pull the trigger on that, but dramatic timing is dramatic, what are you gonna do? But let's think about how long that actually was. I mean, first of all, Jack would have to introduce her to his parents, and then they'd have to arrange a date, and it doesn't seem entirely realistic that the date would be the next day. I would estimate that the date might have been a full year away, potentially. That's where the thing that happens after she collapses falls apart initially. So Ashi, instead of just dying, fades from existence because she would not exist if Aku did not exist in the future. So even if we assume I'm wrong about it taking a year for them to get to the wedding, you mean to tell me that it took longer than like an hour for her to be removed from existence? I feel like there would have been much more of an impact, and it would have made more sense, if she ceased to exist right after the explosion of Aku's tower, and Jack was forced to realize that he had to lose the one he loved in order to save the world from the tyranny he knew would happen. I would say, but dramatic timing here, but let's be real, you don't really lose that impact the way I described it. You replace ripping Jack's heart out in the most dickish way possible with doing so as a complete sudden shock, which affects the audience more as well as Jack. But, of course, that assumes I felt like her being removed from the timeline was the right move at all when you consider the implications on the timeline, and here's where things really fall apart for me. You see, in order for the entire premise of the series to work, there would have to be at least two timelines. One where Jack does get back to the past and kill Aku, and one where he doesn't. Otherwise, him going back in time to destroy Aku would undo his entire journey into the future. Of course, it'd be possible for him to still get back and not create a time paradox, but considering the only person we see to be capable of time travel in the future is Aku and Ashi, it's easy to think that the very act of eradicating your way back to the past before it can exist in the future would create a time paradox. An alternate timeline, though, would allow Jack to be flung into a timeline where he never existed in the first place and return to the one he came from. But that's where the Ashi problem comes into play. Simply put, if Ashi comes from a version of history where Jack never defeated Aku, and as I stated, one where he may not have even existed until the future, then her existence shouldn't be tied to Aku existing in the future. But if her existence was tied to Aku's future existence, then wouldn't she cease to exist the second Aku dies? And why would she collapse beforehand? What, was she using her pure willpower to try to keep herself in existence? And another thing, how does it not create a time paradox when she's the one who sent Jack back in time? Look, I'm not saying that Jack and Ashi should have lived happily ever after and gotten a fairy tale ending. To be honest, I don't think that would be realistically feasible, but they did find a way to make the idea that it could happen make sense, and I applaud Gendy for his work in that regard. I'm just saying that there were much more logical ways to make that ending as bittersweet as it was.